What's up, everybody? My name is Shannon and I am still waiting for my Seder. Are you ready for this? The day has finally come because today we are talking all about the Lunar Chronicles. I finished Winter a couple of days ago and I gotta say, I absolutely loved it. I know my non-spoiler review was really short, but that's because I just couldn't say anymore without giving a bunch of spoilers away because that book was just amazing. It was 800 plus pages of absolute amazingness. It was like a fangirl's dream. It just, oh my gosh, I'm still reeling from it. When I finished that book, I've read a lot of series that have stayed with me, but never before has it stayed with me like the Lunar Chronicles. I even made a whole board on Pinterest just for the Lunar Chronicles. I've only ever done that with one other series, and that's Percy Jackson, because I'm absolutely obsessed with Percy Jackson. My dog's name is even Percy. But oh my god, I just loved the Lunar Chronicles. Winter was amazing. They were all so good. So today, I'm going to run through the whole series for you guys. So I hope you guys are as excited as I am, because let's get started. Okay, so I've seen these books in the bookstore several times, and I'd always walk by them, and I'm like, oh, well, you know, Scarlet and Cress look cool, because I really like Rapunzel and Red Riding Hood, but I really didn't want to read Cinder, because I hate Cinderella stories. I'm so sick of them. They've been done to death. I was just like, what does this have to offer? But my cousin Megan was like, you're gonna love these. These are so good. You need to read them. She just kept pushing it, pushing it, and pushing it. And I was like, I don't know. But then somebody who follows me on Instagram suggested them to me, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna give them a try. They had the audiobooks at my library. I'm like, let's go. Let's listen to them. And I probably was only listening for about 10 minutes to Cinder when I fell absolutely in love with it. The world was so amazing. It's so creative. Props to the author, because she did a retelling, but she did it in her own way. The story is completely her own. It just so happens that all the main characters parallel princesses. I mean, what could be better than that? It's absolutely amazing. I really love Cinder's character. She's very independent. I even like Aiko, even though sometimes Aiko kind of bothered me, but that was probably just because of the narrator's voice. She got really high-pitched for Aiko, so sometimes I was like, oh god, just stop for a second. But it was just absolutely amazing. And then you get to Scarlet and you're like, oh my god, Scarlet's so bold and confident. Look at Wolf, he's so adorable and tortured, and it's absolutely I got to meet Thorn, who I'm in love with. I love Thorn so much. I can't even express to you how in love with Thorn that I am. I am. And I ship Cresswell so hard. I was so excited when I started Cress, because I'm just like, yes, this is the Thorn book. It's gonna be so exciting. And I mean, Cress is definitely my favorite of the four, and that one was probably my favorite book, with Winter probably coming in second, because Winter was just so amazing, because so much stuff happened. So instead of a traditional review, I'm kind of just gonna run through what I loved and what worked and what I didn't like, and hopefully that's just gonna run a little bit smoother. So to start off, I love that there was no love triangles at all. I am so sick of love triangles. It feels like if you're gonna write a YA book, you almost have to have a love triangle. That's what authors think now. You don't need it. Look at these books. You don't need it. She could have done a love triangle between Thorn and Cinder, but she didn't. She's like, no, Cinder's with Kai. I don't need to tease this, because Cress is gonna get Thorn. And they just got to be a bromance, and it was awesome. I'm like, you don't have to do love triangles. And I also love that each couple was different and interesting, in their own way. They weren't the same thing over and over. Cinder and Kai were kind of the adorkable, oh, they're meant to be kind of couple, where she's kind of independent and he's, you know, got all these responsibilities. And it was very interesting, because I love how their personalities work, because Cinder is very, I don't know the word for it, but it's not what Kai is. And I love how the fandoms, our whole thing about Kai, it's just oh, just It's okay. You don't understand. You're so confused. And it's just, she knows everything and it's so great. And then you get to Scarlet and Wolf, and they're kind of like the typical vampire teen romance, but I totally didn't mind because it was just like, I don't even know. It was amazing. And Wolf and Scarlet are so cute. I mean, Wolf cradles tomatoes because she got kidnapped and he was worried about her. It was so sad. And then you have Cress and Thorn, which they're kind of my favorite type of couple, which is probably another reason why I like them so much, because she's like cute and mousy and like hopeless romantic, and Thorn is, you know, the charismatic, funny guy, which I typically go for, and yes, that's my favorite kind of couple. And with Winter and Jason, granted, theirs was okay. I kind of saw theirs coming because she's a princess and he's a guard, which is always fun, but I do think Jason was a little too rigid. But it was a nice contrast compared to Winter, who was very, like, ethereal, because, you know, she's out of her mind, which was very funny. The narrator for the audiobooks does a great job with Winter. Moving on a little bit, I love the world. It's futuristic, and yet not at the same time. I really love how all the countries got set up, like how Asia's basically this whole new kingdom and all of Europe's united. It was very cool, and I love that the whole world is at peace and that their only enemy is, you know, the moon, which, you know, why not? If you're at peace, you gotta have an enemy. And it just, it was almost like a utopia, but not, it wasn't a dystopia, which was great because a lot of books now are just dystopians, but it all worked, and I could never have envisioned this kind of world, and it was amazing. Another thing that I really love that the author does is that she slips in, like, just little details that just add to the whole picture, like, oh, the reason Wolf never had a tomato isn't because of his training, it's because the people in the outer sectors don't get fresh produce, and it just adds this whole nother layer to how the world is run, and it just like lets you run off and speculate and do all like this other stuff, like, oh, well, if that means this and this means this, and then you can do this and here you can do this thing over here, and then you got this. It's so fun. I love when books make you think and like let you run free with your imagination. I did not like in Cinder that Cinder was Celine. When I read that part, I'm like, no. Because the whole book was very unpredictable and I could never really imagine like what was going to happen. But then I started to realize, I'm like, oh, please don't tell me she's Celine. Like, that was so obvious. But as I read on, I did like that she was Celine because Cinder was the perfect person for it because she's seen the hardships, she's seen the prejudice, and she's the person that you want in charge to write all these things. And I also liked she didn't want to be queen, but she knew that she had to be, and I thought that was great. I kind of wish that Winter had gotten to be queen because Winter was already royalty, but I understand why that didn't happen. But I don't know, that was always in the back of my mind, like, oh, I bet you Winter's gonna be the monarch and Cinder's just kind of gonna be like an ambassador or something, I don't know. But she is gonna dissolve the monarchy, so, you know, that works too. Alright, now I just want to take a second and talk about the climax of Winter because it tore my heart into a million pieces because Levana made them all try and kill each other. Like, oh my god, I was practically like crying because like Thorn was gonna jump off the edge, but then he had his hands undone, so Cinder should have let him, but she tried to save him, and then Cress came and shot his fingers off, and then he stabs Cress in the chest. I was like, stop it! My babies! You're hurting my babies! Oh, I had so much fun reading Winter. I really feel like the whole cast of the Lunar Chronicles has become my family. Like, the way people get so attached to like Harry Potter, this is how I feel about the Lunar Chronicles. I'm so glad that I finally read them, and I definitely want to listen to them again. So I was gonna hold off on Stars Above because I have this thing about companion books. I'm like, I don't know. I didn't read Fairest. I was going to read Fairest, but I'm like, you shouldn't have to read companion books, so I skipped over it. I'm probably gonna go back to it now. But I got a couple, like, recommendations, like, oh, please review Stars Above. So I'm like, okay, if my library has it on audiobook, I'll put it on hold. Well, surprisingly, it was available. Nobody had it at the library, so I went ahead and checked it out. So I will be listening to that when I finish Storm. Speaking of Storm, oh my god, like, I'm dying. Like, Storm is just, I have more questions. That's what happens with this series. I don't get any answers, I just get more questions. And you'll get to hear all about that next week because I'm tearing through that book. And whenever I get to it, we will be going through the whole Fallen Kingdom series. If you haven't read them, I highly suggest that you do. They're like Game of Thrones light, so if the thickness of Game of Thrones scares you, or if the nudity in the TV show, you don't want to see it, I would recommend reading Fallen Kingdoms, because it's like the same thing, but shorter and just as traumatizing. Alright, that's all I got for you today, guys. I'll see you next time. Bye! Oh, how many times have I said amazing? This could be like a drinking game, because I'm just gonna keep on saying amazing!